Okay, so today I want to talk about conditioning and more specifically max aerobic speed, not only in a testing sense, but also within a prescriptive sense. Now, max aerobic speed is exactly that. It is the maximum speed that we can put out whilst working aerobically, so with oxygen. Typically, when we think about aerobic capacity or abilities, we think about a VO2 max test, which is the maximum amount of oxygen we can utilize during exercise. So this is performed on an incremental test within a laboratory, and then you'll get a nice high measure of what is the tipping point. What you'll also get is that speed at which you were traveling, whether it's on a bike or a treadmill, when you reached your VO2 max. Now that speed, that velocity is great because it means you can start to prescribe training from it. However, not everyone has a laboratory. We don't have access to everything. So we want to look from a practical point of view. That's where we used to start to see these field tests for aerobic ability. You may have seen like the Bronco, the bleep test, things such as that. The one thing that's quite difficult with that is if you want to establish a speed at which you are traveling, or the average speed at which you're traveling during these tests, you need to take into consideration the change of direction. If you've got lots of changes of direction, there's obviously going to be more neuromuscular fatigue. You're also going to have more time to decelerate and accelerate. So essentially, the easiest thing that you're looking for is some form of straight line running test that lasts between 5 to 7 minutes. This appears to be the optimal time in terms of getting a nice correlation to a true velocity of VO2 max. So some form of test, 5 to 7 minutes. This quite often takes the form of like a 1200 meter test or up to like a 1600 meter test. Once you perform the test, you will have two pieces of information. You'll have the distance you traveled and the time it took you. So if you're doing a 5-minute test, then obviously it's 5 minutes plus however far you traveled. If you're doing a 1200 meter, a 14 or 1600 meter, obviously it's the distance plus the time you took to complete it. So what we have to do is then turn that into a measurement that we can use to prescribe training from. So what you do is you do the distance in meters divided by the time in seconds. Now that might mean that you have to do a bit of maths and calculate from 6 minutes 45 and work that out in seconds. So as you can see here, we ran a mile in 6:45. So that's 1600 meters in 405 seconds. When you divide that, you get a MAS or max aerobic speed of 3.95 meters per second. So this is the average speed, the max aerobic speed that I was traveling at throughout that test. From here, you can now start to prescribe training. So we know what my MAS is, 3.95 seconds. There's a number of methods that you've probably seen or may have heard of. Now, the most common is the Eurofit method. You might not have heard it called the Eurofit method, but it's the one that you most typically see. So it's essentially 15 to 30 seconds straight line running at 120% of your MAS. Rest in place from where you finish for 15 to 30 and then repeat. So you'll quite often see this with just 2 cones marked out, and the athlete has to run one to the other in 15 or whatever your time frame is, and then rest and repeat. Now you can build this up from anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes and repeat 1 to 2 sets. So week 1, you could start with 5 minutes of 15-15, build up to 10 minutes, and then slowly start to add in another set, or increase 30 seconds of work, 30 seconds to rest, again working at 120% of your max aerobic speed. So the calculation would simply be 3.95, because that's my aerobic speed, times 1.2. That's going to give me my 120%. And then I multiply that by 15 because I want to travel that many meters in 15 seconds. Next option that you've probably seen quite often is max aerobic grids. Very similar to the Eurofit method, except your recovery period, you are still on the move. So you work out anywhere from 100 to 110% of your MAS, multiply it by 15 or 30, depending on how many seconds. That's going to give you one side of your rectangle. You're then going to work out 50 or 70, anywhere in between, times it by 15 to 30, and that's going to give you the other side of your rectangle. So you know that you're working hard on those endpoints, and then on those sides, which are going to be longer, you're running at a lower intensity. Again, build up the total amount of time and repeat for 1 or 2 sets. The Other method that you can use, which I quite like, are the long intervals. Okay, now I put these here in there, what I would say the top levels. So 6 times 3 minutes, 90%, 2 minutes rest between each 3 minutes, or you can do 5 by 2 or 4 by 90 seconds. And you're looking to complete 2 sets of that. So it'd be 6 sets of 3 minutes with 2 minutes rest 3 minutes, and then do a second set of 6 times 3 minutes. Now, this is obviously a lot longer, so you've got to be aware of who you're programming for. What I quite like to do is either start, if I've got a longer distance that I want to run with my athletes, I'll start with the 6 times 3 for 1 set, then build to 2 sets, and then we'll move to the 5 to 2 minutes, and then we'll move 4 to 90 seconds. And it's just quite a nice built-in progression. So we do have this downloadable sheet available for teams. Okay, so all you have to do in here is go on the raw data page, input the distance that your athletes traveled and the time that it took them to complete that. From there, the sheet will calculate everything, and it will then work out the percentages and the distances for those different methods that I have talked about. I'll put a link below for a download so you can get that straight into your Google Drive. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments or fire me an email on any of the contact information down in the bottom left.